Hi, y'all, and welcome to tonight's live stream. Lori Vallow Daybell's interview with the Gilbert, Arizona police was nothing short of full-on bizarre. Let's set the scene. And I want you to kind of imagine that you were in this situation. So let's say you and your husband have been separated. You have a kid together, age 7, special needs with autism, but you don't get along with your husband. Like I said, you've been separated. So your husband is coming over to pick up your son and take him to school. You're still married, but you aren't living together. You're a little nervous. So you ask your brother to come over to protect you just in case. And when he arrives, even though everyone is on a deadline to get to school, you decide to grab your husband's phone and refuse to give it back. I know you're thinking, I'm not 10 years old. I'm not going to do that. Well, just stick with me for a minute. Let's keep going through the scenario. So he gets mad and your daughter is asleep, but she hears yelling. She brings a metal baseball bat out thinking she might need to protect you. And your husband takes the bat away and then chases you with it. Your brother goes and gets a gun. Your husband hits your brother on the back of the head. You turn your back for just a minute and you hear a gunshot. You turn around and your husband is lying on the floor, dying. So now, what do you do next? Right? Just think, okay, what do I do next? And you might think, well, I would call 911. I would get emergency services. I would give CPR. You might think of a lot of things, but what you might not think of is what Lori Vallow Daybell did, which is don't call the police. Instead, grab your 16-year-old daughter, Tylee, your 7-year-old son, JJ, and take him to school. And keep sticking with me because it's going to get even stranger. It's a few hours later, and now you are in an interview room being questioned by the police about what on God's green earth just happened at your home. So how would you act? Would you be hysterical? Would you be very sad that even though you hadn't gotten along, this man you have been married to for 14 years is now dead? Would you be afraid that maybe they would think you did something wrong, or worried that your brother will be found to have done something wrong? Would you be worried that your kids are being traumatized or your brother being traumatized because of what's just happened? Well, if you would be any of those things, then this interview is going to be as strange for you as it is for me, because Lori Vallow Daybell has no tears at all. Well, there might be one spot. I'll let you see. She expresses no remorse. She does not say anything about her husband, that she's sad, anything. They ask her, do you want to call anybody? She's like, no, can't think of a soul. Never mind that he has 2 sons. She doesn't look even mildly upset. And the closest she got was after the interviewer left the room, bizarrely, she got a Kleenex and dabbed at her eyes. So it wasn't for show. She did it after the interviewer left. So instead, what you're going to see tonight, we're going to look at the interview together. She told her story. You know, she chatted in an upbeat way. She laughed. She was charming. So tonight, you are going to see one of the most bizarre, incomprehensible, inexplicable interviews I've ever seen. This interview gives us a roadmap to what is in store as nearly 6 years later, Lori Vallow Daybell is going to trial in Arizona, accused of conspiring to murder her husband, Charles Vallow. She has already been convicted of murdering the son she was driving to school and the daughter who went with her when she took him to school. Now, jury selection began today. What is the jury going to make of this surpassingly strange interview. What does it tell us about what she's going to argue at trial and about what the jury will read into that? Tonight, we're going to be looking at the legal elements of what the state has to prove to convict Lori Vallow Daybell. We're going to be analyzing it from that standpoint. Does it help Lori Vallow Daybell? Or does it hurt her? Does it help the state prove the charges against her? We're going to be looking at that specifically in the context of what the law says has to be proven in this case. And then we're going to look at the video. I've left most of it in, almost all of it, because I kind of wanted to go through it. So we're going to have to go through it pretty quickly. I'll have to keep my talking to a minimum, which is always hard for a lawyer, as you know. So we are going to be looking at one of the strangest interviews, like I said, that I've ever seen. So special shout out to the first 5 in the chat tonight: Michelle B., Oklahoma Gigi, Michael Lalonde, Denise Tatinger, and Denise Pelton. 2 Denises. So let's start with, what does the state have to prove? I'm going to tilt this down just a little bit. Yeah. What does the state have to prove for the charges against Lori? So now, according to reports that I saw in several places, the grand jury forwarded charges against both Lori Vallow Daybell and the man she married, the man she was, police believe, having an affair with at the time that she was accused of conspiring to murder her husband, Charles Vallow. And so initially, the grand jury forwarded charges to the prosecution, but they decided to only charge Lori Vallow Daybell, not to charge Chad in this particular case, at least as of right now. So let's take a look at what the charges are. This is the charge against Lori Vallow Daybell. She is charged with conspiracy. I'm going to make it as big as I possibly can in hopes that y'all can see it. Let me arrange that. Yep, you can still see that. Looks pretty good. All right. A person commits conspiracy if, I'll read it once and then kind of break it down into elements so we can talk about it. A person commits conspiracy if, with the intent to promote or aid the commission of an offense, such person agrees with one or more persons that at least one of them or another person will engage in conduct constituting the offense, and one of the parties commits an overt act in furtherance of the offense, except that an overt act shall not be required if the object of the conspiracy was to commit any felony upon the person of another. So breaking that down into elements, first thing is there has to be intent to promote promote or aid committing a crime. So that has to actually be something the person is intending, wanting to do. It also involves an agreement with one or more persons. You can't conspire with yourself. You could commit a crime with yourself, but you can't conspire with yourself. There has to be someone else involved. And at least one of them or another person will engage in conduct constituting the offense. So you have to agree with one or more people that one of you is going to do an act toward a crime, an act furthering a crime. And it could be something at the early stages, or it could be the actual final act. Then one of the parties commits an overt act. In other words, somebody actually does that. You don't just talk about it, but someone actually does something toward the commission of that crime. One of your group does, except that an overt act shall not be required if the object of the conspiracy was to commit any felony upon the person of another. So in other words, it doesn't have to be an overt act if the point of it was to commit a felony. That alone, the fact that you all agreed that you are going to commit a felony, that alone is conspiracy to commit the felony. So, and down below it tells you conspiracy, down in D, conspiracy to commit a Class 1 felony, which assuredly murder is punishable by a sentence of life imprisonment without possibility of release or on any basis until the service of 25 years. So it would require that she spend 25 years in prison without the opportunity for parole. And it could be longer than that. Naturally, at least as of right now, it won't matter for Lori Vallow Daybell because she's already in prison for multiple life sentences for murdering JJ, Tylee, and conspiring to murder Tammy Daybell, Chad Daybell's wife. That's the man she married, is Chad Daybell. So in general, what the state is saying happened here is that Lori got together with her brother Alex, and they planned more or less what was going to happen that morning. They planned for Alex to be there at the early hour of 7:30 by staying over the night before. They planned for him to bring a gun. They planned for some kind of argument to erupt, and for there to be that ultimately that they wanted to murder Charles Vallow. And there are various things they have to support this, like text messages and stuff. We aren't going to get in that tonight because we've got a lot to cover with just the video. So Lori Vallow Daybell's argument is, look, I was just, not I even, Alex Cox, my brother, was defending himself. And here is what the Arizona law would require about that. Let's make it a little bit bigger. So a person is justified in threatening or using physical force against another when and to the extent a reasonable person would believe that physical force is immediately necessary to protect himself against the other's use or attempted use of unlawful physical force. So when would you be justified in self-defense? When would you be allowed to do something in self-defense? And it's when a reasonable person would believe that you needed to do it, that physical force is immediately necessary. You can't wait. You can't run off. You need to do something right now to protect yourself against what the other person is about to do. And it's a reasonable person would believe that. So it's not justified. And I want you to pay attention to these, because when we look at the video, when we look at our interview, we're going to be analyzing it based on these factors. So it's not justified in response to verbal provocation alone. So even if they say something really offensive, that's not justification for self-defense. If the person provoked the other's use or attempted use of unlawful physical force, then it's not justified. And one of the things we're going to be talking about was Lori Vallow Daybell taking the phone provocation? Did she provoke Charles? The person withdrew. So if the person provoked it, if they started it, they caused it, they created this whole situation, then we're not going to let that be justification unless the person withdraws from the encounter or clearly communicates to the other his intent to do so, reasonably believing he cannot safely withdraw from the encounter. So in other words, says, look, I don't want to get in a fight. I'm willing to walk away, and says that out loud. In other words, clearly communicates it, puts the gun down or says something or withdraws. Any of that will break it. Now you're going to see that at no point does Lori apparently give the phone back. We'll talk about what that means. And then B, the other nevertheless continues or attempts to use unlawful physical force against the person. So the person who is claiming they were justified, they provoked it, but then they tried to withdraw, tried to make things less volatile, and it didn't matter. The other person just kind of kept going, kept continuing to use unlawful physical force. So that is something that what I just explained to you is justification for self-defense of yourself. Well, Lori wasn't defending herself. Alex was. But there is another statute. A person is justified in threatening or using physical force or deadly physical force against another to protect a third person if, under the circumstances, as a reasonable person would believe them to be, such person would be justified under the section we saw before in threatening or using physical force or deadly physical force to protect himself. So you also could defend a third party. And that's what Alex Cox would say he did. Although Alex Cox would also say, were he alive today, that he was defending not just himself, he was defending Lori, and Tylee was by now outside, so it really wouldn't be Tylee, but that he was defending himself as well because Charles hit him with the bat. So that's in general what all of our, that's what we're going to be covering. And that's what the law is going to be. And now we're going to take a look. I'm going to stop it just real quick so we can talk for just a minute about what we're going to be looking at. It's almost the entire interview with the long pauses cut out. And so we're going to, the charges against Lori Vallow Daybell are conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, class 1 felony, dangerous. The penalty would be life without the possibility of release for any basis for 25 years, at least 25 years. So those are sort of the arguments that everybody's going to be making at trial. So let's take a look at what she says here. It's very critical to watch her emotion, because I think that is going to be one of the most important factors for the jury. They're going to look at this. They are going to be making decisions about what they think about it. So I'm curious what you think about it, and I'm going to be asking you your opinion too. So Coco, thank you so much for the super sticker. I greatly appreciate that. And Miss Spunky, I appreciate that as well. Thank you. All right, so let's take a look at the
interview. Started last night or something along those lines. Right. So start where you think it makes the most sense.
Okay, so I told you.
Why is this funny?
Well, so we moved into this house 3 weeks ago because he offered to get me a house here where all my family is. So we were in Houston. And so he's like, we had decided to separate or whatever. So,
and I want to stop it there already. Notice one thing she's done is provide a possible motive for her to want to do something to Charles Vallow. They're separated, and she's going to be very overt about how they don't get along, how they're having trouble.
He's like, well, I'll pay for a house for you and for JJ and whatever, because he's all about JJ. He's never about Tylee, but he's all about JJ. Because we adopted him together. He's his great nephew. We adopted him as a so we've been raising him together. And he travels all the time for business, so he's used to just going back and forth. So he's always gone like Monday through Friday. So he came when we first moved in and brought me stuff from Houston, like a U-Haul, and then he hasn't been back. But it's all these threats on my phone all the time, you know, like whatever, all these things. And then he told me...
What kind of threats?
Just... You'd have to read them to see, but he's always mad at me, right? And he doesn't want a divorce, but I don't like him and don't want to deal with him, so that's just how it is. Like, so we married for 14 years, we've dealt with it for 14 years, of him being horrible to her. Like, he gets in huge fights with her, a lot of things, but anyway.
So remember, context. Charles Vallow has been killed that morning. All he did was come over to pick up his son, and everything disintegrated from there. He had no illness, no pre-existing problems medically. All of this happened this morning out of the blue, and this is her reaction to it. Clearly not particularly cut up or distraught about it. Now, she is supporting the story that she's going to tell the jury, however. The story that both of them, she and Alex, they were all defending themselves against a crazed Charles Vallow. So she is telling the interviewers the same similar story to what she told the interview, to what she's going to tell the jury. The jury and the interviewers heard very close to the same story. There will probably be some differences that the prosecution will exploit, and we're going to talk about some distinctions between what she says and what her brother says when he was interviewed at the same time. So, but notice what she's saying about Tylee. She talks a lot about Tylee and how upset Tylee would be with Charles Vallow, about how distraught Tylee would be because they fought all the time, she and Charles Vallow. Not that she fought so much with Charles, but that Tylee did. And so the fact that she talks about that would have any influence at all is that Charles is fighting with a teenager, which who among you who has had a teenager has not had multiple fights with your teenagers? I would like to know what is the secret if you have managed that, but I did not manage that. All right, let's keep listening.
So he said, I'm coming Wednesday night, all of a sudden. I want to see JJ. I told him, I said, I will never keep JJ from you. You can come see whenever you want to. come take him to school, whatever. Like, I'm not going to do that.
So when you initially moved, he had said he was going to buy you a house. So you moved here with your...
Yeah, he was going to rent us a house.
And so you moved...
All my family lives here. So we lived here for a long time.
Okay.
And then he moved us to Houston.
Okay.
And we were there with my son. He was out of school. He didn't have any of his, like, services, his DDD, his anything. He, like, ripped him out of school and said, we're moving.
Okay.
And I didn't go with him at first. And he took him. And I let him take him, and I didn't file anything or whatever. And then he filed something against me and said, I'm only going to get supervised visits because I'm crazy and blah, 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 you know, the story. And so I just didn't talk to him for like 30 days and let him take care of him and let him see what I've been doing for the past 7 years, because men need to do that. You know, I have 5 kids, I have grown kids, I have grandkids.
Yeah.
Like,
So this is a very one-sided recounting of what happened with Lori Vallow Daybell. For 2 months, she left for nearly 2 months. She left and went to Hawaii, where she hung out with friends, where she talked to Chad Daybell every day. And Charles, meanwhile, was back in Houston with JJ, caught flat-footed by her leaving, and said he didn't even, a lot of the time, they didn't even know where Lori was, that they had no idea where she had gone. She just left. So he got his sister, Kay, to come over and help care for JJ. It was very chaotic situation because Lori just up and left. That's the story that Kay and Charles, if he were alive, and Kay will tell. So I was curious, was she really a grandmother at the time? I looked it up, and sure enough, Colby's daughter was born in early February 2019. This is July 2019. So yes, she was. In case you were wondering, I was wondering.
okay, you're going to threaten me that you're not going to let me see my child without supervised visitation? Okay, do it for 30 days and see how long it lasts. You were begging me to come pick him up.
Yeah.
Which he did. She's like, come back and whatever. So I moved in.
And let me stop for just a minute. One of the things that was bothering Charles, one of the reasons he wanted to get custody, maybe prevent Lori from seeing JJ, was because he believed she was having a mental health crisis, that she was in very bad shape emotionally, mentally, and dangerous. In fact, within I guess, what would it be, 2-3 month period, she is accused of killing 2 people, murdering 2 people, her own children, conspiring to murder the wife of the man she then married just 2 weeks later. And this particular crime, as well as the orchestrated shooting at but miss for a man named Brandon Boudreaux, also in Arizona, and a case to be tried next. So he is not completely out to lunch thinking that there is a problem going on. There was a problem going on to create this sort of chaos that would emerge in just a matter of months. Oh no, I hate it when I do that.
She's like, come back and whatever. So I moved in with them to Houston for the family, you know, and Tyler went with me. We drove to Houston from here and left all our family and all his support, all my son's support, like his cousins, everything. And we were there, and I enrolled him in school there. I tried to start all his services, and it takes forever.
Yeah.
You know, it takes so long to get that done.
There's no easy transferring.
There's no easy transfer.
You start from the beginning.
It's a totally new thing.
Yeah.
And he didn't do any of it in those 30 days. So he just had gone without services, without even applying. And I'm like, do you even realize? Because he didn't ever do it in the first place. I did it. And he's like, I'm coming.
I can't relate to that. I think probably a lot of us could. One of the things I want you to watch, what Lori Vallow Daybell does throughout this, is that she overtalks, that she talks about irrelevant things, that she seems to really want to be perceived as likable, as friendly, as chatty, and to distract from the real issues. She's trying to build rapport with things. And here, for example, you'll see building bridges to the interviewer about men not taking care of the children, men not getting all the things done that they ought to be doing in order to take care of the children. She had to do this all herself. So you see that throughout, and we kind of watch that as she does that.
And I'm going to come pick up JJ and take him to school Thursday, pick him up Thursday, take him Friday, whatever. And I said, Casey wanted to come to the house. And I said, you can't come stay at this house because you can't get along with Tylee. She's a minor. She has to live here.
Yeah.
So because he gets in huge fights up there.
Okay.
And she hates him.
So again, blaming Tylee. Tylee is the one who does not get along with him. The reason why I think that's kind of significant is remember what she told her son Colby on a YouTube interview that he posted a few months ago. And remember what she told Dateline when she interviewed with them just a matter of weeks ago. Each time she said that she wasn't responsible for murdering JJ and Tylee. It was Tylee who did it. Tylee who killed JJ and then unalived herself because she was so distraught over what she had done. But she blamed Tylee. It's not exactly the same here because Tylee isn't being blamed for the wrongdoing, but she is being blamed for creating the problem. And so now she goes on to talk about how Charles Vallow traveled a lot. And you just hear the resentment throughout this. Notice though that there is absolutely nothing about violence. And remember what that standard was if she's going to claim self-defense. So you're going to hear that there's nothing other than talk about fighting with teenagers.
It kind of just gives him freedom that he doesn't have to stay home every day and take care of special needs child. It's like an excuse, right? So I've done that myself for the last 7 years anyway. And I was a single mom before I married him with my 2 kids. Yeah. And he had 2 kids. We got married, tried to make a family. You know how it goes. Anyway, so he said he was coming last night. I said, well, you can't stay at this house because you can't get along with Tylee, and I'll get you a hotel and you can come play with JJ. But he goes to school all day. Yeah. I got him back into his school. His services, I met with the DDD yesterday, and they finally are getting his services back, but we're paying $125 a day to have him back at school because he's so out of his routine. He's been a nightmare on the floor, kicking stuff, hitting stuff, walls, like, he just ripped him out of his life. So, anyway, just how he is, because he only thinks about himself.
So here are all the rabbit trails that she goes down that don't really have anything to do with it. Stories that would garner sympathy or make a connection with the interviewer.
He says, coming to get JJ, and JJ's like, I don't want Dad, because he knows Dad took him away, so he was freaking out, right? So I didn't tell him he was even coming, like, Dad's going to come take you to school, I think. So he didn't bother me last night, which I was surprised. I was expecting kind of an ambush for him to kind of, like, come over or be just mean and say, it's my house, I'm on the lease, I'm going to stay here, kind of thing, because that's kind of his macho attitude. And so he came this morning. I was getting JJ ready.
So he got in last night, but he wasn't at the house last night.
Yeah, I didn't hear from him, except for he texted me and said, I'll be there at 7:30 to pick up JJ. Okay. And I was like, okay. He came over in the morning, and he's like banging on the door. I'm like,
so think about this from the perspective of the prosecution and what they're going to talk to the jury about. What's Charles doing here? Well, he's helping by taking JJ to school. This isn't combative or confrontational. He's being flexible on what little he gets, what little time he gets with JJ. And he's being respectful about the rules that she wants. She doesn't want him to stay in his own home, which even though he owns, he says, okay. And he goes to a hotel for the night. So each of those little factors are small, but each one sort of goes toward the prosecution. This doesn't seem like a guy who is bent on being violent. It seems like a guy who simply is trying to be respectful and deal with a difficult situation. So, and I want to say thank you to Marlon and happy birthday, Loretta Powell. We are so happy to have you with our channel. Thank you for being here and happy birthday. And thank you, Marlon, who has been a member for 13 months. That is awesome. Nana of 7 has been a member for 10 months and asked, did I see the motion hearing today? Which I haven't. I've read a summary of it, but I haven't actually watched it yet. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for being my favorite channel, says Stephanie. Well, thank you. What a nice compliment. I'm very appreciative. Thank you. All right, let's keep listening.
oh, great, here we go, And I was just going to be nice. I was going to be nice as possible, and I had JJ stuff all ready for school, and so.
Do you remember about what time he got there?
He said he'd be there at 7:30, but it was more like 7:40-ish or 7:35, I don't know.
Okay.
But I remember thinking, looking at the clock, and he wasn't there at 7:30, and he's usually Mr. On time. Yes, so I was like, okay. And then JJ was like, oh, Dad. And then he was like, Mommy, and like ran to me and was like holding me. He's like, you're not taking me to school. And I was like, it's okay, Daddy can just drive you to school. It's not a big deal. Just trying to make it whatever. Calm. Yeah, calm. And then he was just being real smirky and real like jerky, to me. And I was like ignoring him, whatever.
Your brother lives there with you?
No.
And remember what we're looking for. And being a jerk is nowhere near enough to justify murder. That's not self-defense. So, and now we're going to head off on a wandering tangent here.
Okay.
He had stayed with me last night because I was worried he was going to come over and
Okay.
cause trouble with me.
Okay.
And just wanted someone else there, like my brother there, because I trust my brother. And it's been a long story. Like, I had to go live at my brother's when he took JJ, and he's just been difficult. So anyway.
And let me stop it there for just a minute. What she says about why Alex Cox is there that morning is not the same thing that Alex Cox tells the police. She says that she was there because she wanted someone else. She trusts him. She was worried that Charles Vallow was going to, quote, cause trouble with her when he came over that morning. Alex Cox says, no, I didn't know anything about it. We were just going to have a fun day together, even though JJ was at school. I guess he and Lori and I assume the 16-year-old Tylee.
So I got JJ stuff ready. And he was like, well, and he's like this about timing. He's like, I'm leaving in 20 minutes because it's like 15 minutes to the school, and like you can't get there early. They don't open the gates until 8:20 or something like that. And I said, well, why don't you just go now? I don't want him in the house. I'm like, why don't you just go now and take him to Burger King because that's what he likes for breakfast. And he's very particular about food. Like, he wanted chicken fries for breakfast and the Sprite. Like, and I just get what he wants, because if you don't get what he wants, then it's like on the floor screaming, dragging him into school. Like, and he's big and he's heavy, and it's hard for me to handle that.
So you hear all that, just trying to be charming, little irrelevant stories. She's just making herself very likable.
Anyway, so I said, just go. And so he said, okay. So I gave him a backpack. He got in the car. This is his MO, right? He always leaves something in the house and comes back. He never leaves the first time. I always expect my husband to come back into the house, right? So I guess he had left his phone on the counter.
So he initially left with the backpack and with JJ? And
so he put them in the car, in the driveway, and then he came back in, right? So I kissed JJ goodbye. He came back in, and his phone was on the counter, and I had his phone. And he was like, give me my phone. And I was like, why don't you show me your text that you've been texting, blah, 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 whatever. Because he's like acting really weird, like he's plotting something against me. Like, I'm like, why are you even here? Like, what did you come here for? He's been talking to my other brother, and my brother came into town at the same time last night.
So now on this next part, be listening for whether or not Lori was provoking him, because that will be one of the arguments the state might choose to make, is that she provoked him by taking the phone. Now, that's not the same, though, as the provocation to be violent. So they're different things, but just sort of listen to the story and think about it through that filter. I do want to say one thing about the never leaving the first time. That is 100% me. I never leave the first time. In fact, our dog, who religiously greeted every single person who ever came to the door, always, when I would leave and I would come back in, inevitably, he didn't even get up because he knew that was me going out and then just coming back in, because I never leave the first time, exactly like Charles Vallow.
And I haven't talked to my brother in a while, my other brother, and I was like, and so he was texting him on the phone when he first got to my house, and I'm like, why are you texting Adam? Like, do you even talk to him? Like, my other brother. And, he's been telling me all these texts, like, you're going down, blah, 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 blah. He's blaming me for our marriage breaking up and my niece getting divorced and my friend getting divorced. He said, I'm a destroyer of families because I want everybody to get divorced. I'm like, what would my motivation be for people getting divorced? So I could babysit the kids more? Like, why would I have any control over what people do?
Yeah.
So it's just very odd. But anyway, he goes nuts. He's gone nuts on us a lot of times. Tylee and I have had to leave with JJ over the years probably 5 times and just stay in a hotel for 2 days because he goes nuts. Like, you don't know what's going to set him off. Like, whatever. And she's mad at me for always, like, going back. But we had JJ and he's special needs, and it's really hard. Like, it's even hard to take care of it by yourself.
So when you say he goes nuts, that can mean a lot of different things.
Right.
So goes nuts like yelling and screaming.
Yeah,
goes
yelling
nuts
and screaming,
like breaking
like,
things.
yes.
Goes nuts like physical violence.
He's never really, besides like grabbing us and pushing us, but not like punching us or something, but with Tylee, he has gotten physical
Okay.
before, and with my grown son.
Like physical how?
Like got into a physical fist fight with my son when he was 16.
Okay.
And he came after Tylee 2 times in Hawaii.
Okay.
And like went like he was going to hit her, but then I got in between them. Right.
How old was she when that happened?
Probably 13 and 14.
Okay.
Okay,
so
now
this morning
she's going to, this is one of the things she's doing is kind of going on a tangent to just make Charles Vallow look guilty, like a violent person. But it's not all that well suited to what's happening here, because a fist fight with a 16-year-old 5 or 6 years ago, I mean, does that have anything to do with physical force being, quote, immediately necessary to protect himself against the other's use or attempted use of unlawful physical force? I mean, those are just really a long way apart, but those are the kinds of things she's doing. And she talks a lot about Charles Vallow, but it doesn't really hit exactly what she's needing to hit.
comes back in and...
He comes back in, I wouldn't give him his phone. He was screaming at me to give him his phone. He was very worried about whatever was on his text that he did not want me to see. And so I was just holding it there, and he was screaming at me. And I was kind of walking towards around the house with it, so he couldn't get it. He's like reaching for it and stuff like that.
It's like, you know, playing keep away with little children. It's like, seriously, just hand him his phone. What are you doing? There does not seem to be a period of time when she returns it. I don't see that anywhere in the description of what she's saying there. The next thing that happens, though, escalates.
And so Tylee came out of her room upset, and she had a bat, and she told him to leave her mother alone, like, right? So she was really whatever, and he's screaming at her, "Don't you hit me with that bat," blah, 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 blah. And then my brother heard all the commotion because he was in there in bed, and so he came out into the main room, and I guess whatever.
What's your brother's name?
Alex.
Alex, okay.
And then he just started, he was screaming and he was super upset and whatever, and he's yelling at Tylee, "Don't you hit me with that bat," and blah, blah, blah. And so Tylee, I guess, I don't know if she swung at him or what, but he like grabbed the bat from Tylee and then went to like hit Tylee with the bat. It was, and I was right there, they were right there, and my brother grabbed him from behind, like just to stop him from hitting Tylee.
You go like this, like he grabbed him like...
Yeah, from behind, like just kind of to pull him back. And then they got into the thing, and he's hitting him with the bat, and they're on the ground, like grappling around or whatever. And then, I mean, that was all
And he
quickly.
And he hit your brother with the bat while they were grappling and stuff?
Yeah, yes, he was hitting him with the bat, like swinging the bat, you know, back and forth, and they were kind of like on the ground, and I was like freaking out trying to go around, knowing JJ was in the car, right? And so then he got up and he had the bat like this towards me, and
So arguably force was needed to protect Tylee if Charles Vallow was about to hit Tylee. But then that stopped, and Tylee actually ends up leaving the house. And at some point, Charles is going after, according to the story that we hear from Lori Vallow Daybell here, Charles is going after her. But at some point, Alex actually leaves the room and goes to get a gun. So that's when the nature completely changes from people who are arguing with each other, people who are fighting, to actual deadly force.
I was going around the other side to try to just get out of his range where he couldn't hit me. And then I had told Tylee, because she was on the ground, because after he took the bat from her, she fell back. And so I told her, I was like, "Go get in the car with JJ. Like, I don't want JJ coming in to the house, or and I wanted her out of the way. I wanted the kids out of the way, whatever this fight was going to be." And then,
Do you remember what your husband or your brother were saying or yelling during all of this? If they were at all?
just kind of, "Get off me, ow," or whatever, you know, whatever. They were like, "Don't talk to my niece that way," whatever. Like, it was, I don't remember specifics, but they were kind of both, they were kind of in the heat of it. I don't think there was many words that I remember.
So Tylee goes outside,
Yeah, she was outside,
and then what happened?
then they got up from that, and my brother had like stepped back, I guess, and then Charles was coming with me at the back, yelling at me to give him his phone still, because I had it in my hand. It was all really quickly, and then when I went around kind of in the circle, then my brother was there.
When you said when you were going around and he was coming at you with the bat, how was he holding the bat?
Just like that, like backwards, almost in one arm.
Like he was swinging it backwards? He would have done like
he would have swung it backwards at me, not frontwards.
Okay, yeah.
He was a professional baseball player.
Okay.
So it wasn't a good idea for Tyler to get out of that.
Probably not the.
I mean, he played semi-pro.
Yeah.
And he was, yeah.
So I have a question for you here. She's laughing about this. This probably wasn't a good idea to get a bat, and kind of laughing. What do you think about that? Because the jury is going to be evaluating things like that. Do you think that she's just sort of cope laughing and she's just doing that in order to be able to deal with an awkward situation? Or does it strike you as really bizarre, just highly inappropriate? If you feel like it's normal, kind of just cope laughing, put a 1 in the chat or the comments. If you're thinking, no, this is bizarre, laughing at this point is bizarre, put a 2 in the chat and we'll take a look at what happens. So,
But, yeah, and then I was kind of turned around, and we were all right there in that room, except for the kids had been outside by that time, and I heard the gunshot. And
So you heard the shot? Did you actually see the shot, or did you just hear it?
I had gone around to the kitchen to get away from him, and so back around. So I don't know if you went in the house.
I didn't, so I'm like a little bit of a disadvantage.
Yeah, so I didn't see the shot. I heard it, and then I came back around and I saw that he was on the ground.
Okay.
And was freaking out.
Yeah.
And so I was just freaking out, and it just went into mom mode. I'm like, I've got to go to get JJ to school. I've got to get to the kids. I just felt like I got to get to the kids. And so I just went outside and to see if they were in there okay. I didn't want them coming back in the house when all that was going on. And got JJ in the car, and he was trying to come in, and Tylee was like looking at me with like the crazy eyes, like what just happened. And I told her to get in the car and we're going to take JJ to school. And I just left.
When you came back in and you saw him on the ground, where was your brother? Did you see him where he was at?
Yeah, he was right in front of him.
Okay.
Like it all happened very quickly. That
Right.
was, I mean, I feel like I was there because I was right there, and like
Yeah.
a second later, like
Okay.
I just went around the kitchen to get away from him.
Did your brother say anything to you at all? Do you remember?
No, we were both just in shock.
Okay.
Like it was just I didn't say anything. I went out with the kids just to check on them first, and I was gonna come back in maybe, but I didn't. I was like, I just have to get him to school
Okay.
and call the police and come back, whatever.
Did anybody say did you or your brother say anything at some point about calling the police or calling 911? Do you remember?
Yeah, he called me. And
Okay.
he said, are you taking JJ to school? And I said, yeah, we need to call the police. And he said, okay.
Okay. So he called you when you didn't come back inside, basically?
Right.
Okay.
Because I was like in the car for a minute, and then I was like, what do I do? And I didn't want JJ to go inside, and I didn't know what to do, and Tylee was freaking out. I was trying to get them away from the scene.
Understandable. And you may not know this, so, because I know you heard the shot, do you know at what point your brother had the gun? Do you know if he had it when they got in their first fight, or did he have to go get it, or do you know that at all?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
And do you remember if you ever heard your brother?
I didn't see him ever leave the room.
Okay.
So it was so fast. All that was so fast. Like him on the ground rolling around, and I'm screaming, and
This probably happened in a couple seconds.
yeah, I mean it was like super fast.
And I don't know if you know this or not, does your brother normally carry a gun? Like, I carry a gun everywhere I go.
Right, like I
So-
know he's a gun person, like he
Okay.
has guns and things. and
Okay.
He's
Did you-
good with guns. And
Did you know that he had one with him when
no,
he came over?
no, but
Okay.
I wouldn't be surprised if he did, because
Okay.
he's very, very professional with guns.
Proficient, professional?
So as she's talking, you kind of hear her talking about the fact that she was turned around. Conveniently, she saw absolutely nothing of the actual shooting. But notice she talked about a shot, not multiple shots, a shot. The interviewer doesn't really pin her down on that. She said, I heard a shot, but the interviewer doesn't say, how many was it? Was it one? Was it two? Was it three? And we're going to see some distinctions between those, between what Alex said, between what was found at the scene and what Lori said. But it wasn't really pinned down all that well during the interview. So I don't know how far they'll get with that.
Responsible is usually a good
Right,
better word.
responsible with guns.
And then, do you remember if at any time, so you were trying to get away from him,
Right.
and you heard the shot. Prior to the shot, do you remember at any point hearing your husband or your brother saying anything to either of them?
No.
So my second very ridiculous question is there anything else that I didn't ask about or anything that we didn't cover that you think is important? I always ask that just because I wasn't there, and so we're going through something that happened
Right.
a super small amount of time.
Yes. Can I
So,
step?
yeah, go for it.
Just thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Just that. He was just so angry, like super scary.
Did you
You know how you take your phone away from like a 16-year-old and they freak out? Like their world disintegrates. Like I've taken my phone away from a 16-year-old boy before, and he's like wanted to kill himself because like they cannot function. That's how it was. It was like it's something on his phone that he does not want me to see. That he was like freaking out, like to the point where I thought he would hit me in the back of the head to get the phone.
Okay. So you thought, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you thought it was possible that he was going to hurt you.
Absolutely, he was gonna hurt me and Tylee.
Okay.
Not JJ. He would never hurt JJ.
Okay.
And he hurt my brother. Like
Yeah.
he was going like ballistic about. It was bad.
Okay. I'm going to go talk to her real quick.
Okay.
And then if, obviously, we'll be here for a little bit, hopefully not too much longer. And then, is there anybody that...
So before we get to this next part, let's talk a little bit about what we've just heard Lori Vallow Daybell say. Because she says she thinks he's unbelievably angry, quote, super scary, and all because she took his phone. Why would you not turn around and hand the phone back to the person? That is mystifying to me. If you think they're that freak out level, give them back the phone. If you think they might hurt you or Tylee or your brother, give them back the phone. I don't understand kind of why we're pursuing this, but she is hitting the right. Let's add this back to the stage. I have to remove that first and then add this. Okay, so let's take a look at when the person would be justified, and we'll go back to this one, is a reasonable person would believe that physical force is immediately necessary to protect himself against the other's use or attempted use of unlawful physical force. So the reason the words are so important. The words that she's saying about how scary he was and how frightening and how upset he was and angry, all of those things feed into this right here, because they feed into the idea that physical force was immediately necessary to protect Lori. Tylee was, by the time of the shooting, already outside, so that shouldn't really count, and to protect Alex from what was happening. And she says she was turned around away from Charles. I don't know why, but she was turned around and away from him. She mentioned being afraid he would hit her in the back of the head, and yet she was turned around when he was actually shot by Alex and when they were grappling on the floor. So you can see where the words are going to be used by the prosecution to say, look, some of your actions don't really make sense. The things you did, like suddenly leaving, like turning your back on someone carrying a bat and coming after you, like hanging onto a phone when you could have just handed it back. None of that makes any sense. Lori Vallow Daybell is going to say, this is consistent with my story, that I was physically afraid. We were all physically afraid. Charles was crazy and we had to protect ourselves. So that is sort of the way that this is going to shake out in the course of it. We'll talk about kind of my overview in just a minute, but let's listen to a little bit more. I have to remove that and add.
Call or anything, or you want to wait a little bit?
This is.
I don't know what I would say.
No. And wait a little bit. We'll see.
Yeah. I don't know what I would say.
And if you want to, you can think about it. So.
Okay. So, wait. I know. How about you call Charles's two sons who don't even know that their father has been killed? His two sons by a prior marriage. They didn't find out for 36 hours after the shooting that their father had been killed. And she told them by text and just, sorry to tell you that your dad died. Didn't even tell them why. And they're blowing up her phone like, what do you mean our dad died? What happened? What are you talking about? And so, but she's asked, is there anybody you want to call? And she says, I don't know what I would say. No. We'll see. I don't know what I would say. So it doesn't occur to her that maybe his family members need to know. Maybe Kay, his sister, needs to be informed immediately about what just happened. But that isn't really on her mind at this time. So, and like I say, it was some time before she even thought to maybe let his sons by the prior marriage know about it. So one of the things that does seem clear from this interview is that nobody seemed to be seriously suspecting Lori Vallow Daybell of involvement in the murder. Now, they were considering, I think, whether or not Alex Cox maybe was involved in some way, but this detective just doesn't really pin Lori down, doesn't get all that specific. They don't bring her in repeatedly. It doesn't seem like they are looking at her as a potential suspect. And in fact, they offer her victim services here, which could be for the children.
Victim services that work within the police department. They're right over here. They're not cops, they're civilians. And they do, Jessica, who's out there with the fire department, so they're kind of our crisis response. They come right away. Mm-hmm. So our victim services that work in the department are kind of more long-term type support systems. So they're just a really good resource because they do a lot of stuff with our families and things like that and can help with support services and questions you might have.
She's been through so much.
So it might be a good idea.
I just can't stand for her to have to go through all this.
Yeah, it might be a good idea maybe before I take you guys back today that I get one of them to come in and maybe sit and talk with you guys and see. And it's not something there's a bunch of stuff they can offer, but it's good to have a contact and like a name and a face and a phone number.
That'd be good.
Hopefully if there's something that they can help you and your daughter with, they can, or even JJ or whatever else.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I hadn't even thought about him.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
right
He's
there.
used to him not being there, but
That's probably some real emotion right there. That's one of the few sort of strong reactions. I even thought about him, how is he going to deal with this?
he wouldn't understand even if you told him
Right.
like that somebody passed away. He doesn't understand
What that means. Well, I mean, it's hard at 7 to understand that anyways.
Right, that's true. But with him, he just doesn't, which is
Yeah.
probably better because he doesn't comprehend things.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. It's just That's a lot to think about.
Yeah.
So at this point, the detective leaves to go talk to Tylee and to interview her as well about what happened. Now, Lori does start with what looked to me like possibly a few tears, but then she moves into kind of this Zen mode. And so take a look.
Okay.
She grabs a Kleenex. And it's odd that she does this. It can't be for show. I mean, now the detective has left. The opportunity to persuade them you were upset has passed. And here it is. She's just been talking about how the kids might be affected. Remember that. And now she goes into the Zen. I just left it for a minute so you could kind of see. And she almost seemed to fall asleep maybe. And she's going to wake up when the detective comes back in, having already talked to Tylee. So I'm curious what you think about that. I'm curious, just put some comments in. Do you think she was truly emotional there? And if so, what caused that when nothing else in this interview seemed to really impact her in an emotional way? Why suddenly did she have that feeling?
Yeah. So one of the victim services, Denise, is here. So I kind of told her just a little bit of what happened. So if you're good with it, I'm going to have her come over and I'm going to introduce her to you guys so you guys can talk for a little bit, which kind of works well too because I need to run over to where my partner's at and just talk to him a little bit. That way you guys will have a little bit, hopefully, extra support if you need it. So I'm going to go grab Denise real fast and then introduce you guys. Okay?
So at this point, she's talking about, the detective is telling her about these services that could be offered that might help them and specifically could really help the children. And she's offering this sort of as an opportunity for her so that if she's worried about the children, this could be a way to help. So this is, of course, followed by more Zen. I broke it there because I want to take a specific look at what Lori Vallow Daybell says about Tylee during the interview. Now, you've heard several things that fit in with the flow of what we talked about so far, but here's how she started off the bat. And this is going retroactively to the first part of the interview, but I wanted to put it together with this little section on Tylee.
Like, they don't care.
The interview is about to begin that you've just seen so
When
far.
she was in elementary and junior high, all the teachers worked with her. They were nice about it. But by high school, there's so many kids that just don't care. And I was like, just take it. You're so smart. Let's just take it, see if you pass it. She passed it.
And got a really good score?
Yeah, she passed it with like college ready in every category the first time.
Well, and now she can do what she wants. So
Exactly.
she's better off that way.
Mm-hmm.
So she starts talking about that. And then the last thing she talks about is also about that, about Tylee.
Hi.
She's talking now to the woman who can help with the services.
She's gonna take you over to like a conference room so you guys can sit and talk and stuff. And then you can just, once you guys talk and kind of, you can decide if you're comfortable with Tylee coming in or whatever.
Okay, sure.
And then we'll
I just didn't want her to be left alone in the
Yeah,
room by herself.
yeah.
She's freaking out. Like,
so we keep kind of popping in and checking on her and
I
stuff.
just didn't want her to be alone too long.
Yeah.
We'll be as brief for as long as you want, okay? I'm here to try to, you got lots of choices when you talk, so. Well,
Okay, so we'll stop it there. That is pretty much the bulk of the interview, an incredibly short interview for something that ultimately ended in murder charges, but that's all that they have related to Lori. They don't have more detailed interviews following that. So I am very curious kind of what your perceptions of Lori Vallow Daybell is when you watch this interview, and also about how you think it will mesh with what the legal requirements are. So you heard her talk about, let me remove that and then add this to the stage. So you heard her talk about the threat of force and that they were afraid of Charles. She built up Charles as someone dangerous, but as someone who was dangerous, more like having had a few fights with the teenage kids. until that very morning. Now, that would be enough. It's not that you have to have been dangerous for a certain period of time, but many of the stories she told are really not relevant. They don't really fit with what he's being charged with here. But she talks about when he had the bat, how she was afraid. Tylee, they were worried for Tylee, and they were worried for Alex. She had taken the phone from him. She had done that and provoked him and never broken it. But she hadn't done anything to cause unlawful force. So those are sort of the factors the jury will have to consider. And of course, they'll be looking at the question of reasonableness of defending a third person. Alex could well just have been defending himself, however. He doesn't have to have been defending someone else. But throughout this, Lori talks about how she was afraid and how she believed she might be in danger herself. So let's remove that. And okay, let's do a few questions. And first, while y'all are putting questions in, if you would please put question marks at the beginning, it'll be a lot easier for me to spot. Let me make that bigger. Okay, so let me make sure I've said thank you. I know I said thank you to Coco and Spunky. Thank you very much. And Marlon, who has been a member for 13 months, and Nana for 10 months. And Chico Karen has been a member for 13 months and thinks Lori is an actor. Thinks not really buying it. Thank you, Chico Karen. And then Stephanie, who says it's her favorite channel. We love that, Stephanie. Thank you so much. And Jebby has been a member for 8 months and thinks this is a Jodi Arias clone. And that's saying a lot, huh? That is really saying something. All right, so let's head over and look for questions. Put your question marks at the beginning so I have a shot of finding them. And let's see what I've got over here. I'm trying to get over there. Do you think the prosecution will pick up on the fact that, says Phyllis Andrews? Uh-oh. Phyllis, I think you got cut off. I'll look for you the rest of it in here. That's all I have so far. Bonbon, did she have a competence hearing? She had a competency evaluation where there was a question of whether or not, in fact, her attorneys asked for that and said, we don't think she's competent. And there was an examination of her by more than one psychiatrist. They concluded, yes, she was able to she was actually able to know what she was going through. She was able to understand the circumstances. She was able to understand the proceedings. She was able to give assistance to an attorney. And then she applied to be able to represent herself. She didn't want those same lawyers. And that was approved on the ground that if she was competent to stand trial, she was also competent to choose her own counsel. And she chose Lori Vallow Daybell. So that is going to be absolutely wild. I cannot even kind of picture it. It is going to be a very, very strange trial. Scooter, will the jury know that out of the 5 people in the room when Charles was shot, Lori's the only one left alive? So how are there 5 people in the room when Charles was shot? We've got Charles and Lori and Alex and JJ and Tylee are out in the car. Okay, well, that would be 5, but I think JJ and Tylee were out in the car. Correct. Dead. Alex, dead. And Charles, dead. They will find out. Of course, they'll know that Charles is dead. That's the whole point of this. Alex, I don't think that'll just be mentioned that he's died, but I don't think there will be anything more than that because of the fact there was never any finding that there was something untoward about it or that maybe it was underhanded, something. Many people believe that it can't be a coincidence, but that is not what the autopsy report showed. So no one's ever been charged or much less convicted in that. So, as far as I think they'll probably know that the children are dead, but the judge is probably going to limit how much they can know about what has occurred or what she's been found guilty of. I don't know the exact ruling on what he said about that. Shiroshina, are they going to allow her brother's interview into trial? I was wondering about that today, Shiroshina. I was doing some research trying to see if the judge had ruled on that. Typically, a co-conspirator's statements come in against the conspirator. So Alex was accused of conspiring with Lori to murder Charles Vallow, and therefore he was a co-conspirator. His statements would come in. So I was curious if the judge had done anything. It's, of course, hearsay because he's not available to testify about it. So I imagine it will come in. That would be my guess, but we will we'll have to find out. I couldn't find an answer as to what the judge had ruled on that. I was wondering too. Phyllis asked me, Alex should have already been out there instead of waiting to hear yelling if he was there for security. Do you think the prosecution will pick up on that? So I think Alex was standing there. It was Tylee who came out with the bat. So I think, I'm not totally sure. That's an interesting point, Phyllis. If Alex wasn't even out there when she's meeting him, then what good was he as protection? Linda, do you think she knew she was being recorded? Oh, I do think she knew that. And yeah, it did occur to me, I agree with you, Linda. Maybe she was reaching for the tissue kind of for show, but if so, she made no effort at any other time to show that, which was kind of odd, I thought. I mean, it just seemed like just such a wrong reaction to what was happening. And that's, I think the jury may well pick up on that. I'll have to go back and see what y'all put in about your ones and twos. But to me, the jury is pretty likely to say, wow, you know, this is a strange reaction to a very emotional, very upsetting situation. Even if you don't like the person, having someone murdered in your home or just shot and killed in your home, that's pretty upsetting. I think most people would be pretty upset about that. She's very nonchalant about the whole thing. Maria Z, and also I see Michael asking about my dad. He is doing great, and we are going to be doing the live stream this week. My dad turned 90. We were going to have a big celebration here on the channel. Everybody sent in questions. We were going to find out what a 90-year-old would advise us to do, but he got sick for his birthday, which was a shame. So now we're going to have it this week because I want to do it now before some of the trials get rolling. I think Lori Vallow Daybell's will start pretty soon. Karen Reed's going to take another few weeks probably for the jury selection. But thank you, Maria and Michael. I appreciate your asking. Madam August Butterfly says, am I shocked at the depths of depravity that Lori will go to blame her own daughter? And to be fair on this, she isn't blaming her daughter for the death of Charles Vallow, but she is the one who brought out the bat. She is the one who kind of escalated the situation. And then just like you say, we heard over and over about Tylee this, and Tylee had arguments, and Tylee fought with him, and Tylee had the bad relationship with him. And of course, hugely, she directly blamed Tylee for killing JJ and then unaliving herself, of which there was no evidence. And so that was a very bold statement, and it is very disturbing. I don't think there's another way to put that. MB, why was the gun at the house clip in a hard case in the bedroom if he was only going to hang out and have fun? Well, MB, we will look at his interview so you can see for yourself what he said, but he said he always carried a gun. It was just his habit and custom, and so he had it with him because he always did. So that was his story about that. Barb Russell, don't forget, everyone is a zombie. Well, that is so disturbing, Barb. I hope that you are wrong. That it is true that she had told friends of hers that her husband, who was killed in her home, had become a zombie, that he was no longer the Charles Vallow she had married, that he was now occupied by an evil spirit. Coincidentally, JJ and Tylee would both become zombies occupied by evil spirits, and their bodies would die. And then, of course, Chad Daybell's wife, Tammy, same story. So it did happen over and over. Now, as far as Brandon Boudreaux, the same story happened, except Brandon did not actually die. He was shot at, but he did not die. But again, there was discussion in the group of women and Chad Daybell who were discussing it about what his status was in terms of zombie. Rowan Rome wants to know, if she's already convicted, why does she fight this charge? And I think it's for a couple of reasons. And you could argue this from the state side too. Why bother the prosecutor? She's in prison for 3 lifetimes. I mean, how many lifetimes is she going to give them? Well, the answer is that it is a couple of things. One is that there's still a need for justice in this case because Charles Vallow has relatives, friends. His life mattered, and the fact that there is punishment for what happened to JJ and Tylee, for Tammy Daybell, that doesn't avenge what happened to Charles Vallow. It doesn't address the need for justice in that particular case. And there's also the question of whether or not on appeal something might change. And in maybe the case would be overturned, or one of them would be overturned. Maybe the sentence would be reduced. Who knows? And if so, there's this other conviction out there where she will still spend time in prison if she is convicted. And so I think that's why they do both. From her standpoint, why fight it? Among other things, it's kind of amusing. I mean, something to do while you're in prison. And I think she doesn't really have a choice. She has to show up. She has to make a defense. She could do a minimal defense, but she has to be present while she's being prosecuted for this. I think that she may hope, well, she even says that she will not remain in prison, that God has told her that's not her future, that at some point in the future she's going to be out. So maybe she thinks she can win this. Her other conviction will be overturned, and then she'll be free to go. All right, looking for question marks at the beginning. Will Alex's wife Zulema be testifying? I don't know. I don't know whether she will come or not. By the way, Lori had pretty much none of her witnesses have had subpoenas yet, so it's not looking good for them to be able to testify. She's still got time, but it is looking kind of questionable as to how that will go. And I'm looking forward to actually watching the hearing. I read the excerpts and I read the blogs on what was happening, but I'm looking forward to seeing today's hearing. Okay, looking for another question. Oh, thank you, Heather. I appreciate that. She's liking the information. I appreciate it, Heather. Thank you. Amanda asking me, do you think she will be able to stand being questioned without losing her cool? So that brings up two questions. Is she actually going to get on the stand? Is she actually going to testify? And if she does, how will she do? I don't know. I think it's going to be, the whole trial is going to be wild, because you've got someone with sort of questionable mental status because she's been questioned over and over. In fact, for a period of time, her trial in Idaho was put off while they believed she was not competent to stand trial. And that has happened. She has been evaluated more than once because there was concern about that. And she's going to be doing the actual questioning of the victims in the case, the family members, the people who are talking about what occurred. She's going to be doing that questioning in addition to getting on the stand if that's what happens. So it's going to be absolutely wild. I just can't even imagine what the trial is going to look like by the time this all shakes out. I think it's going to be pretty wild. Well, I will be dropping a Karen Reed video pretty soon, and I will look forward to seeing you all Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern. I will see you then. Thanks to our mod, Marla Mama Pink.